Hi everyone, and welcome back to my Nightstand Horror Hour with your friendly Ewitch, the Wicked Witch of the Web. I am back with part 2 of Monster Blood, starting with chapter 9 here. So get cozy and let's get started. Are we going to bake that pie today? Evan asked his aunt, writing the question on a pad of yellow-lined paper he had found on the desk in his room. Catherine read the question while adjusting her black ponytail. Her face was as white as cake flour in the morning sunlight filtering through the kitchen window. "Pie? What pie?" she replied coldly. Evan's mouth dropped open. He decided not to remind her. "Go play with your friends," Catherine said, still coldly, petting Sarah Beth's head as the black cat walked by the breakfast table. "Why do you want to stay inside with an old witch?" It was 3 days later. Evan had tried to be friendly with his aunt, but the more he tried, the colder she had become. "She's mean, she's really mean," he thought as he ate the last spoonful of cereal from his bowl of shredded wheat. That was the only cereal she had. Evan struggled to choke it down every morning. Even with milk, the cereal was so dry and she wouldn't even let him put sugar in it. "Looks like it might rain," Catherine said, and took a long sip of the strong tea she had brewed. Her teeth clicked noisily as she drank. Evan turned his eyes to the bright sunlight outside the window. What made her think it was going to rain? He glanced back at her, seated across from him at the small kitchen table. For the first time, he noticed the pendant around her neck. It was cream-colored and sort of bone-shaped. It is a bone, Evan decided. He stared hard at it, trying to decide if it was a real bone from some animal maybe, or a bone carved out of ivory. Catching his stare, Catherine reached up with a large hand and tucked the pendant inside her blouse. "Go see your girlfriend. She's a pretty one," Catherine said. She took another long sip of tea, again clicking her teeth as she swallowed. "Yes, I've got to get out of here," Evan thought. He pushed his chair back, stood up, and carried his bowl to the sink. "I can't take much more of this," Evan thought miserably. "She hates me, she really does." He hurried up the stairs to his room, where he brushed his curly red hair. Staring into the mirror, he thought of the call he had received from his mother the night before. She had called right after dinner, and he could tell immediately from her voice that things weren't going well down in Atlanta. "How's it going, Mom?" he had asked, so happy to hear her voice even though she was nearly 1,000 miles away. "Slowly," his mother had replied hesitantly. "What do you mean? How's Dad? Did you find a house?" The question seemed to pour out of him like air escaping a balloon. "Whoa, slow down," Mrs. Ross had replied. She sounded tired. "We're both fine, but it's taking a little longer to find a house than we thought. We just haven't found anything we like." "Does that mean," Evan started. "We found one really nice house. Very big, very pretty," his mother interrupted. "But the school you'd go to wasn't very good." "Oh, that's okay. I don't have to go to school," Evan joked. He could hear his father saying something in the background. His mother covered the receiver to reply. "When are you coming to pick me up?" Evan asked eagerly. It took his mother a while to answer. "Well, that's the problem," she said finally. "We may need a few more days down here than we thought. How's it going up there, Evan? Are you okay?" Hearing the bad news that he'd have to stay even longer with Catherine had made Evan feel like screaming and kicking the wall. But he didn't want to upset his mother. He told her he was fine and that he'd made a new friend. His father had taken the phone and offered a few encouraging words. "Hang in there," he had said just before ending the conversation. "I'm hanging in," Evan had thought glumly. But hearing his parents' voices had made him even more homesick. Now it was the next morning. Putting down his hairbrush, he examined himself quickly in his dresser mirror. He was wearing denim cutoffs and a red Gap t-shirt. Downstairs, he hurried through the kitchen where Catherine appeared to be arguing with Sarah Beth, ran out the back door, then jogged to the backyard to get Trigger. "Hey, Trigger!" But the dog was asleep, lying on his side in the center of his run, gently snoring. "Don't you want to go to Andy's house?" Evan asked quietly. Trigger stirred but didn't open his eyes. "Okay, see you later," Evan said. He made sure Trigger's water bowl was filled, then headed to the front of the house. He was halfway down the next block, walking slowly, thinking about his parents so far away in Atlanta, when a boy's voice called out, "Hey, you!" And two boys stepped onto the sidewalk in front of him, blocking his way. Startled, Evan stared from one boy to the other. They were twins, identical twins. Both were big, beefy guys with short white blonde hair and round red faces. They were both wearing dark t-shirts with the names of heavy metal bands on the front, baggy shorts and high-top sneakers untied without socks. Evan guessed they were about 14 or 15. "Who are you?" one of them asked menacingly, narrowing his pale gray eyes, trying to act tough. Both twins moved closer, forcing Evan to take a big step back. "These guys are twice my size," Evan realized, feeling a wave of fear sweep over him. "Are they just acting tough, or do they really mean to give me trouble?" I'm staying with my aunt," he stammered, shoving his hands into his pockets and taking another step back. The twins flashed each other quick grins. "You can't walk on this block," one of them said, hovering over Evan. "Yeah, you're not a resident," the other added. "That's a big word," Evan cracked, then immediately wished he hadn't said it. "Why can't I ever keep my big mouth shut?" he asked himself. His eyes surveyed the neighborhood, searching for someone who might come to his aid in case the twins decided to get rough. But there was no one in sight. Front doors were closed, yards were empty. Way down the block he could see a mailman heading the other way, too far away to shout to. No one around, no one to help him. And the two boys, their faces set, their eyes still menacing, began to move in on him. Chapter 10. "Where do you think you're going?" one of the twins asked. His hands were balled into fists at his sides. He stepped closer until he was just an inch or two from Evan, forcing Evan to take a few steps back. "To see a friend," Evan replied uncertainly. Maybe these guys were just bluffing. "Not allowed," the twin said quickly, grinning at his brother. They both snickered and moved toward Evan, forcing him to back off the curb onto the street. "You're not a resident," the other one repeated. He narrowed his eyes, trying to look tough. "Hey, give me a break, guys," Evan said. He tried moving to the side, walking on the street to get around them, but they both moved quickly to keep him from getting away. "Maybe you could pay a toll," one of them said. "Yeah," the other one quickly chimed in. "You could pay the non-resident toll, to get temporary permission for walking on this block." "I don't have any money," Evan said, feeling his fear grow. He suddenly remembered he had $8 in his pocket. Were they going to rob him? Would they beat him up and then rob him? "You have to pay the toll," one of them said, leering at him. "Let's just see what you've got." They both moved quickly forward, making a grab for him. He backed away. His legs suddenly felt heavy from fear. Suddenly, a voice cried out from down the sidewalk. "Hey, what's going on?" Evan raised his eyes past the two hulking boys to see Andy speeding toward them on her bike along the curb. "Evan, hi," she called. The twins turned away from Evan to greet the new arrival. "Hi, Andy," one of them said in a mocking tone. "How's it going, Andy?" the other one asked, imitating his brother. Andy braked her bike and dropped both feet to the ground. She was wearing bright pink shorts and a yellow sleeveless undershirt top. Her face was red, her forehead beaded with perspiration from pedaling so hard. "You two," she said, and made an unpleasant face. "Rick and Tony." She turned to Evan. "Were they getting on your case?" "Well," Evan started hesitantly. "We were just welcoming him to the neighborhood," the one named Rick said, grinning at his brother. Tony started to add something, but Andy interrupted. Well, leave him alone. Are you his mother? Tony asked, snickering. He turned to Evan and made goo-goo baby noises. Well, leave him alone, Rick said, stepping toward Andy. We'll borrow your bike and leave him alone. No way, Andy said heatedly. But before Andy could move, Rick grabbed the handlebars. Let go, Andy cried, trying to pull the bike from his grasp. Rick held tight. Tony shoved Andy hard. She lost her balance and fell, and the bike toppled over on top of her. Oh, Andy uttered a low cry as she hit her head on the concrete curb. She lay sprawled on the curb, her hands flailing, the bike on top of her. Before she could get up, Tony reached down and grabbed the bike away. He swung his legs over the seat and began to pedal furiously. Wait up, his brother called, laughing as he ran alongside. In seconds, the twins had disappeared around the corner with Andy's bike. Andy, are you okay? Evan cried, hurrying to the curb. Are you okay? He grabbed Andy's hand and pulled her to her feet. She stood up groggily, rubbing the back of her head. I hate those creeps, she said. She brushed the dirt and grass off her shorts and legs. Ow, that hurt. Who are they? Evan asked. The Baymer twins, she answered, making a disgusted face. Real heavy-duty dudes, she added sarcastically. She checked her leg to see if it was cut. It was just scraped. They think they're so cool, but they're total creeps. What about your bike? Should we call the police or something? Evan asked. No need, she said quietly, brushing back her dark hair. I'll get it back. They've done this before. They'll leave it somewhere when they're finished. But shouldn't we? Evan started. They just run wild, Andy interrupted. There's no one home to check up on them. They live with their grandmother, but she's never around. Did they give you a hard time? Evan nodded. I was afraid I was going to have to pound them, he joked. Andy didn't laugh. I'd like to pound them, she said angrily. Just once. I'd like to pay them back. They pick on all the kids in the neighborhood, and they think they can do whatever they want because they're so big and because there's two of them. Your knee is cut, Evan said, pointing. I'd better get home and clean it up, she replied, rolling her eyes disgustedly. See you later, okay? I have to go somewhere this afternoon, but maybe we can do something tomorrow. She headed back to her house, rubbing the back of her head. Evan returned to Catherine's, walking slowly, thinking about the Baymer twins, daydreaming about fighting them, imagining himself beating them to a pulp in a fight as Andy watched, cheering him on. Catherine was dusting the front room as Evan entered. She didn't look up. He headed quickly up the stairs to his room. Now what am I going to do, he wondered, pacing back and forth. The blue container of monster blood caught his eye. He walked over to the bookshelf and picked up the can from the middle shelf. He pulled off the lid. The can was nearly full. I guess Trigger didn't eat that much, he thought, feeling a little relieved. Trigger! He'd forgotten all about him. The poor dog must be hungry. Putting down the monster blood, Evan bombed down the stairs, leaning against the banister and taking the stairs 3 at a time. Then, running full out, he practically flew to the dog run at the back of the yard. Trigger! Hey, Trigger, he called. Halfway across the yard, Evan could see that something was wrong. Trigger's eyes were bulging, his mouth was wide open, his tongue flailing rapidly from side to side, white spittle running down his chin hair onto the ground. Trigger! The dog was gasping hoarsely, each breath a desperate, difficult struggle. He's choking, Evan realized. As Evan reached the dog run, Trigger's eyes rolled back, and the dog's legs collapsed under him, his stomach still heaving, the air filled with his loud, hideous gasps. Chapter 11. Trigger, no! Evan dived to his knees beside the dog and began to tug at Trigger's collar. The collar, Evan saw, had become way too tight. The dog's chest heaved. Thick, white spittle flowed from his open mouth. "Hold on, boy, hold on," Evan cried. The dog's eyes rolled wildly in his head. He didn't seem to see or hear Evan. "Hold on, fella, just hold on." The collar wouldn't budge. It was buried tightly under the dog's fur. His hands shaking, Evan struggled to pull the collar over Trigger's head. "Come loose, come loose, come loose," he begged. Yes. Trigger uttered a pained whimper as Evan finally managed to pull the collar away. "Trigger, it's off. Are you okay?" Still panting hard, the dog jumped immediately to his feet. He licked Evan's face appreciatively, covering Evan's cheek with his thick saliva, whimpering as if he understood that Evan had just saved his life. "Easy, boy, easy, fella," Evan repeated, but the dog continued to lick him gratefully. Evan hugged the excited dog. This had been a close call, he knew. If he hadn't come along just then, well, he didn't want to think about it. When Trigger finally calmed down, Evan examined the collar. "What made this collar shrink like that, boy?" he asked Trigger. The dog had walked over to the fence and was frantically slurping water from his bowl. This is plain weird, Evan thought. The collar couldn't have shrunk. It's made of leather. There was no reason for it to shrink. Then why did it suddenly start choking Trigger? Evan turned to Trigger, studying him as the dog lapped greedily at the water, breathing hard. He turned and glanced back at Evan for a second, then returned to his frantic water slurping. He's bigger, Evan decided. He's definitely bigger. But Trigger was 12 years old, 84 in human years, older than Aunt Catherine. Trigger was too old for a late growth spurt. It must be my eyes, Evan decided, tossing the collar to the ground. This place must be making me see things. Catherine was at the kitchen door, calling Evan to lunch. He poured out a bowl of dry food, shouted goodbye to Trigger, who didn't look up from the water dish, and hurried to the house. The next morning, an overcast morning with the autumn chill in the air, Evan made his way to Andy's house. He found her huddled under a big maple tree in the neighbor's front yard. "What's going on?" he called. Then he saw that she was leaning over something, her hands working quickly. "Come help me," she cried, not looking up. Evan jogged over. "Whoa," he cried out when he saw that Andy was struggling to free a calico cat that had been tied to the tree trunk. The cat screeched and swiped its paw at Andy. Andy dodged the claws and continued to pull at the big knots in the rope. "The Bamer twins did this, I know it," she said loudly, over the shrilly protesting cat. "This poor cat was probably tied up here all night." The cat, in a panic, shrieked with amazingly human-sounding cries. "Stand still, cat," Evan said, as the terrified cat swiped its claws at Andy again. "Can I help?" "No, I've almost got it," she replied, tugging at the knot. "I'd like to tie Rick and Tony to this tree." "Poor frightened cat," Evan said quietly. "There," Andy said triumphantly, pulling the rope loose. The cat gave one last cry of protest, its tail standing straight up. Then it darted away, running at full speed, and disappeared under a tall hedge without looking back. "Not very polite," Evan muttered. Andy stood up and sighed. He was wearing faded denim jeans and a pale green oversized t-shirt that came down to nearly her knees. She lifted the bottom of the shirt to examine a hole the cat had managed to snag it in. "I can't believe those two creeps," she said, shaking her head. "Maybe we should call the police, or the ASPCA or something," Evan suggested. "The twins would just deny it," Andy said glumly, shaking her head. Then she added, "And the cat's not a very good witness." They both laughed. Evan led the way back to his aunt's house. All the way back, they talked about how they'd like to teach the Bamer twins a lesson, but neither of them had any good ideas. They found Catherine concentrating on a jigsaw puzzle at the dining room table. She looked up when they entered, squinting at them. "You like jigsaw puzzles? I like to keep my mind active, you know. That's why I like puzzles. Your mind can get flabby when you get to my age, 112. She slapped the table gleefully at her own wit. Evan and Andy both flashed her agreeable smiles. Then she returned to her puzzle without waiting for a reply. She's going to drive me bananas, Evan exclaimed. Evan, she'll hear you, Andy protested, cupping a hand over his mouth. I told you, she's completely deaf. She can't hear me. She doesn't want to hear anyone. She hates everyone. I think she's sweet, Andy said. Why does she wear a bone around her neck? Probably thinks it's cool, Evan cracked. Let's go upstairs, Andy urged, pushing him toward the stairs. I still feel weird talking about your aunt right in front of her. You're a crazy old coot, Evan called to Catherine, a big smile on his face. Catherine looked up from her puzzle pieces to cast a cold stare his way. She heard you, Andy cried, horrified. Don't be dumb, Evan said, and started up the stairs, nearly tripping over Sarah Beth. Up in Evan's room, Andy paced uncomfortably. What do you want to do? Well, we could read some of these great books, Evan said sarcastically, pointing to the dusty old books that lined the walls. Maybe find a spell to cast on the Bamer twins. You know, turn them into newts. Forget about newts, Andy said dryly. Hey, where's the monster blood? Before Evan could answer, she spotted it on one of the shelves. They raced across the room for it. Andy got there first and grabbed the can. Evan, look, she said, her eyes growing wide with surprise. What's going on? She held up the can. The green gunk had pushed up the lid and was flowing up out of the can. Chapter 12. Huh. Did the top break or something? Evan asked. He took the can from her and examined it. Sure enough, the lid had popped off. The gooey green substance was pushing up out of the can. Evan pulled out a handful of the green gunk. Weird, he exclaimed. It's expanding, he said, squeezing it in his hand. It's definitely growing. I guess so, Andy exclaimed. It grew right out of the can. Hey, it's not cold anymore, Evan said. He balled it up and tossed it to Andy. It's really warm, she agreed. Weird. She tried to toss it back to him, but it stuck to her palm. It's getting sticky, she reported. Are you sure this is the same stuff? Of course, Evan replied. But it wasn't sticky before, remember, she said. He pulled another warm hunk of it from the can. I guess it just changes after the can has been opened. He squeezed the stuff into a ball shape and tossed it to the floor. Look, it stuck to the floor. It didn't bounce. Weird, Andy repeated. Maybe I should throw it in the trash, Evan said, prying the sticky glob from the floor. I mean, what good is it if it doesn't bounce? Hey, no way, Andy said. We've got to see what it does next. A soft mewing sound made them both turn toward the door. Evan was surprised to see Sarah Beth standing there, her head cocked, her yellow eyes staring at him. Or was she staring at the glob of monster blood in his hand? That cat looks so intelligent, Andy said. It's as stupid as every other cat, Evan muttered. Look, she wants to play ball with the monster blood. Sorry, cat, Andy said. It doesn't bounce. As if she understood, Sarah Beth mewed unhappily, turned, and padded silently from the room. Now where am I going to keep this stuff? Evan asked. It's too big for its can. Here, how about this? Andy asked. She reached down to a low shelf and came up with an empty coffee can. Yeah, okay. Evan tossed his hunk into the coffee can. Andy squeezed hers into a flat pancake. Look, it isn't glowing the way it used to either, she said, holding the pancake up for Evan to see. But it sure is warm, almost hot. It's alive, Evan screamed playfully. Run for your life, it's alive! Andy laughed and began to chase Evan, menacing him with the flat green pancake. Come get your monster blood, come and get it! He dodged away, then grabbed it from her hand. He squeezed it together, balling it up in one hand, then tossed it into the coffee can. They both peered into the can. The green substance filled it up a little more than halfway. "Go ahead, taste it," Andy urged, poking the can in his face. "I dare you." "Huh? No way, I double dare you," Andy said, pushing the coffee can back to her. "Double darers have to go first," Andy insisted, grinning. "Go ahead, taste it." Evan made a disgusted face and shook his head. Then he grabbed a big hunk of it and heaved it at Andy. Laughing, she picked it up off the carpet and tossed it at his face. She threw high, and the green glob stuck to the wall. Evan reached for another hunk. They had a messy, hilarious monster blood battle till dinner time. Then, as they tried to clean it up, they both heard Trigger through the open window. He was barking loudly out in his pen. Evan reached the window first. The sky was still gray and overcast. Trigger was leaning on the wooden fence, standing on his hind legs, barking his head off. "Whoa, Trigger," Evan called. "Chill out." "Hey, what's with Trigger?" Andy asked. "Is your dog still growing? He looks so big." Evan's mouth dropped open, and he uttered a silent gasp, realizing that Andy was right. Trigger had nearly doubled in size. Chapter 13. "Trigger, come back! Come back!" The big dog continued to run, its giant paws thundering against the concrete. "Come back!" Evan screamed, running with long, desperate strides, his heart thudding, his legs aching with each step as he tried to catch up with the galloping dog. The night was dark and starless. The street glistened as if it had recently rained. Trigger's paws hit the pavement, each step a loud thunderclap that seemed to echo forever. His giant ears flapped like wings, twin pennants caught on the wind. His big head bobbed up and down, but he didn't look back. "Trigger! Trigger!" Evan's voice seemed muffled by the gusting wind, pushed back in his face. He tried shouting, louder, but no sound came out at all. He knew he had to stop the dog from running away. He had to catch the dog and then get help. Trigger was growing so fast, completely out of control. He was already the size of a pony and getting larger by the minute. "Trigger, Trigger, stop, boy!" Trigger didn't seem to hear him. Evan's voice didn't seem to carry beyond the gusting, swirling wind, and still Evan ran, his chest pounding, every muscle aching, and as he ran, he suddenly realized there were others running too. Two large figures in front of the stampeding dog. Two large figures Evan recognized as they fled at full speed, trying to get away from the onrushing animal. The Bamer twins, Rick and Tony. Trigger was chasing them, Evan suddenly realized. The boys turned a corner onto an even darker street. Trigger followed, bounding after them. Evan continued to run, bringing up the rear of this dark, mysterious parade. All was silent now, except for the steady, rhythmic thunder of Trigger's enormous, padded paws. Except for the clap, clap, clap of the Bamer twins' sneakers as they darted along the glistening pavement. Except for the gasp of Evan's breathing as he struggled to keep up. Suddenly, as Evan watched in horror, the dog raised up on its hind legs. He tilted his head to the sky and let out an ear-piercing howl. Not the howl of a dog, a creature howl. And then Trigger's features began to transform. His forehead burst forward and enlarged. His eyes grew wide and round before sinking under the protruding forehead. Fangs slid from his gaping mouth, and he uttered another howl. To the sky, louder and more chilling than the first. "He's a monster, Evan cried, and woke up from his frightening dream, and realized he was in bed, in the study upstairs in Catherine's house. It had all been a dream, a frightening, wild chase of a dream, a harmless dream, except that something still wasn't right. The bed. It felt so uncomfortable, so cramped. Evan sat up, alert, wide awake now, and stared down at his giant feet, his giant hands, and realized how tiny the bed seemed beneath him, because he was a giant now, because he had grown so huge, so monstrously huge. And when he saw how big he had become, he opened his mouth wide and began to scream. Chapter 14. His screams woke him up. This time he really woke up and realized that, the first time, he had only dreamed that he was awake. He had only dreamed that he had become a giant. Dreams upon dreams. Was he really awake now? He sat up, blinked, rubbed his eyes, and struggled to focus. Dripping with sweat, his blankets tossed to the floor, his pajamas damp, clinging to his prickly skin. Nothing seemed familiar. It took a while to shake off the dream, to remember where he was, that he was in his room at Catherine's, awake now, his normal size. Tossed by the wind, the curtains brushed over him, then were noisily sucked out the window. Evan sat up, and, still feeling shaky, peered out the window. Wisps of gray clouds floated over a half moon. Trees tossed and whispered in the cool night wind. Only a dream, a frightening dream, a dream on top of a dream. He could see Trigger sound asleep, curled up on himself, pressed against the fence wall. Trigger wasn't a monster, but he was definitely bigger, Evan saw. Maybe there's something wrong with him. The troubling thought pushed its way into Evan's mind as he stared down at the sleeping dog. Maybe it's glands or something. Maybe he's eating too much. Or maybe... Evan yawned. He realized he was too sleepy to think clearly. Maybe the next morning he'd see if there was a vet in town. Yawning again, he started to settle back into bed. But something caught his eye. The coffee can on the bookshelf. The can where he had stored the monster blood. "Hey!" he cried aloud. The green gunk was bubbling, quivering up over the top of the coffee can. Chapter 15. Your dog seems to be quite healthy for his age. Dr. Forrest scratched Trigger gently under the chin. "Look at all the white hairs," he said, bringing his face down close to the dog's. "You're a good old dog, aren't you?" Trigger licked the doctor's hand appreciatively. Dr. Forrest grinned, pushing his black eyeglasses up on his narrow nose, the ceiling light reflecting off his shiny forehead. He wiped his hand on the front of his white lab coat. Evan and Andy stood across from Trigger in the small, brightly lit office. They had both been tense during the long examination the vet had given the dog, but now, hearing the doctor's verdict, they had relaxed, expressions on their faces. "So you think it's just a late growth spurt?" Evan repeated. Dr. Forrest nodded, returning to his desk in the corner. "Highly unusual," he said softly, leaning over the desk to write a note in his pad. "Highly unusual. We'll get a lab report in 3 or 4 days. It may tell us more. But the dog seems very healthy to me. I really wouldn't be alarmed." "But do Cocker Spaniels usually get this big?" Evan asked, leaning down to scratch Trigger under the chin. The leash looped loosely in his hand. Trigger wanted to leave. He pulled toward the door. Evan stood up and tugged hard at the leash to keep the dog in place. It took all of his strength. Trigger was not only bigger, he was much stronger than he had been a few days before. "No, not usually," the vet replied. "That's why I took the hormone tests and the blood and glandular samples. Maybe the lab will have an answer for us." He finished writing and tore the sheet off the pad. "Here," he said, handing the paper to Evan. "I wrote down the name of a good dog food. Put Trigger on this and see that he cuts down on his between-meal snacks." He chuckled at his own joke. Evan thanked the doctor and allowed Trigger to pull him out of the office. Andy jogged after them. In the waiting room outside, a tiny chihuahua cowered behind the couch, whimpering at the sight of the big cocker spaniel. "I'm glad to be out of there," Evan exclaimed as they stepped out to the sidewalk. "Trigger got a very good report," Andy said reassuringly, petting Trigger's head. "Hey, look! His head is wider than my hand." "He's nearly as big as a sheepdog," Evan said miserably. "And Dr. Forrest says he's perfectly okay." "Don't exaggerate," Andy scolded. She glanced at her watch. "Oh no, I don't believe it. Late for my piano lesson? Again? Mom will kill me." She waved goodbye, turned, and ran full speed down the sidewalk, nearly colliding with an elderly couple coming slowly out of the small grocery store on the corner. "Let's go, boy," Evan said, thinking about what Dr. Forrest had said. Tugging the leash, he headed out of the small 3-block town. Despite the vet's reassurances, Evan was still plenty worried about Trigger. He stopped outside the grocery store. "Maybe an ice cream pop will help cheer me up." He tied Trigger's leash to the red fire hydrant across from the grocery store. "Stay," he instructed. Trigger, ignoring Evan, struggled to pull free. "I'll only be a second," Evan said, and hurried into the store. There were 3 or 4 people in the store, and it took a bit longer than Evan had expected. When he had returned to the sidewalk 10 minutes later, he discovered the Bamer twins busily untying Trigger. "Hey, let go!" he cried angrily. They both turned toward him, identical grins on their beefy faces. "Look what we found," one of them teased. The other one successfully untied the leash from the hydrant. "Hand me that," Evan insisted, holding his chocolate ice cream bar in one hand, reaching for the leash handle with the other. The Bamer twin held the leash handle out to Evan, then quickly snapped it back out of his reach. "Gotcha!" The brothers laughed gleefully and slapped each other a high five. "Stop fooling around," Evan insisted. "Hand me the leash." "Finders keepers," one of them said. "Isn't that right, Tony?" "Yeah," Tony replied, grinning. "It's an ugly dog, but it's our ugly dog now." "Get your own dog, wimp," Rick said nastily. He stepped forward and punched the ice cream bar out of Evan's hand. It landed on the sidewalk with a plop. The brothers started to laugh, but their laughter was cut short as Trigger suddenly uttered a low, warning growl. Pulling back his lips, he bared his teeth, and his growl became a snarl. "Hey!" Rick cried, dropping the leash. With a loud, angry roar, Trigger reared up and pounced on Rick, forcing him to stagger backwards to the curb. Tony had already started to run, his sneakers pounding on the pavement noisily as he headed at full speed past the vet's office, past the post office, and kept going. "Wait up! Hey, Tony, wait up!" Rick stumbled, stood up, and took off after his brother. Evan grabbed for Trigger's leash and missed. "Trigger, whoa, stop!" The dog took after the fleeing twins, barking angrily, his enormous paws thudding loudly on the pavement, picking up speed as he closed in on them. No, Evan thought, finding himself frozen there on the corner in front of the grocery store. No, 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 this can't be happening. It's my dream. Is it coming true? Evan shuddered, remembering the rest of his dream, remembering how he too grew until he was twice his size. Would that part of the dream also come true? Chapter 16. That afternoon, about an hour before dinner time, Evan called Andy. "Can I come over?" he asked. "I have a small problem." "Sounds like a big problem," Andy said. "Yeah, okay, a big problem," Evan snapped impatiently. "I'm not in the mood to kid around, okay?" "Okay, sorry," Andy replied quickly. "Any sign of Rick and Tony? They're not your problem, are they?" "Not at the moment," he told her. "I told you they were gone by the time I caught up with Trigger. Disappeared, vanished. Trigger was still barking his head off. Somehow I dragged him home and got him in his pen." "So what's the problem?" she asked. "I can't tell you. I have to show you," he said. "I'll be right there. Bye." He hung up the phone and hurried down the stairs, carrying the bucket. Catherine was in the kitchen, her back to him, chopping away at something with her big butcher knife. Evan hurried past and darted out the door. Andy's house was a modern redwood ranch style with a low hedge of evergreens running along the front. Her dad, she said, was a fanatic about the lawn. It was clipped a perfect 1.5 inches above the ground, smooth as a carpet. A flower garden stretched along the front of the house, tall orange and yellow tiger lilies bobbing in the gentle breeze. The front door was open. Evan knocked on the screen door. "What's the bucket?" was Andy's greeting as she let him in. "Look," he said, out of breath from running all the way to her house. He held up the aluminum bucket he had taken from Catherine's garage. "Oh, wow," Andy exclaimed, raising her hands to her face as she stared into it wide-eyed. "Yeah, wow," he repeated sarcastically. "The monster blood is grown again. Look, it's almost filled this big bucket. What are we going to do?" "What do you mean, we?" Andy teased, leading him into the den. "Not funny," he muttered. "You didn't want to share it," she insisted. "I'll share it now," he said eagerly. "In fact, do you want it?" "I'll give it to you for a bargain price. Free." He held the bucket toward her. "Uh-huh." Andy shook her head, crossing her arms in front of her chest. "Put it down, will you?" She pointed to the corner behind the red leather couch. "Put it over there. It's giving me the creeps." "Giving you the creeps," Evan cried. "What am I going to do? Every time I turn around, it grows some more. It's growing faster than Trigger." "Hey!" they both cried at once. Both had the same thought, the same frightening memory. Both suddenly remembered that Trigger had eaten a ball of the green gunk. "Do you think," Evan started. "Maybe," Andy replied, not waiting for him to finish his thought. "Maybe Trigger's growing because he ate the monster blood." "What am I going to do?" Evan wailed, pacing the room nervously, his hands shoved into his jeans pockets. "The stuff is getting bigger, and so is poor Trigger. I'm all alone here. There's no one who can help me, no one." "What about your aunt?" Andy suggested, staring at the bucket on the floor in the corner. "Maybe Catherine can think of something." "Are you kidding? She can't hear me. She doesn't want to hear me. She hates me. She just sits at her jigsaw puzzle and argues with that horrible black cat all day." "Okay, forget the aunt," Andy said, making a dispirited face. "Perhaps if you told Dr. Forrest—" "Oh yeah, for sure," Evan snapped. "He'd really believe that Trigger is turning into a giant because I let him eat monster blood." He threw himself down on the couch. "I'm all alone here, Andy. There's no one to help me, no one I can even talk to about this." "Except me?" "Yeah," he said, locking his eyes on hers. "Except you." She plopped down on the other end of the couch. "Well, what can I do?" she asked hesitantly. He jumped up and carried the bucket over. "Take some of this. Let's split it up." "Huh? Why don't we just toss it in the trash?" she asked, staring down at it. The green gunk was pushing up near the top of the bucket. "Toss it? We can't," he said. "Sure we can. Come on, I'll show you." She reached for the bucket handle, but he shoved it out of her reach. "What if it outgrows the trash can?" he asked. "What if it just keeps growing?" Andy shrugged. "I don't know." "Also, I have to save it," Evan continued excitedly. "If it's really the thing that's causing Trigger to grow, I'll need it as proof, to show the doctors or whatever, so they can cure Trigger." "Maybe we should call the police," Andy said thoughtfully, tugging at a strand of hair. "Oh, sure," Evan replied, rolling his eyes. "They'll really believe us, for sure. We bought this stuff in a toy store, officer, and now it's growing bigger and bigger, and it's turning my dog into a giant monster." Okay, you're right," Andy said. "We can't call the police." "So are you going to help me?" Evan demanded. "Will you take some of this stuff?" "I guess," she said reluctantly, "but just a little." She climbed to her feet, carefully stepping around the bucket. "I'll be right back." She left the room, then quickly returned, carrying an empty coffee can. "Fill her up," she said, smiling. Evan stared at the coffee can. "That's all you're going to take?" he complained. Then he immediately softened his tone. Okay, it's a help. Andy crouched down and dipped the coffee can into the middle of the bucket. Hey, she cried out. Her hands flew up, and she stumbled back onto the floor. What's wrong? Evan hurried over to her. It was pulling the coffee can in, she said, her features tight with fear and surprise. Sucking it. Look. Evan peered into the bucket. The coffee can had disappeared under the surface. Huh? I could feel it pulling, Andy said shakily. She regained her perch over the bucket. Let's see, Evan said, and plunged both hands into the middle of the monster blood. Yuck, Andy said. This is really gross. It's pulling, you're right, Evan agreed. It feels like it's pulling my hands down. Wow. It's so warm, as if it's alive. Don't say that, Andy cried with a shudder. Just get the can out, okay? Evan had to tug hard, but he managed to pull up the coffee can, filled to the top with the quivering green substance. Yuck. You sure I have to take this? Andy asked, not reaching for it even though he was holding it out to her. Just for a little bit, he said, till we think of a better plan. Maybe we could feed it to the Bamer twins, Andy suggested, finally taking the can. Then we'd have a giant Bamer twins, Evan joked. No, thank you. Seriously, you'd better watch out for them, Andy warned. If Trigger scared them away this morning, they'll be looking to get back at you. They really think they're tough dudes, Evan. They can be vicious. They could really hurt you. Thanks for trying to cheer me up, Evan said glumly. He was still pulling tiny, clinging clumps of the monster blood off his hands and tossing them into the bucket. I was watching a video before you came over. The first Indiana Jones movie. Want to watch it? Evan shook his head. No, I'd better go. Aunt Catherine was busy making dinner when I left. Chopped up some kind of meat. Another great dinner, sitting there in silence, being stared at by Aunt Catherine and her cat. Poor Evan, Andy said, half teasing, half sympathetic. He picked up the bucket, now only 2/3 full, and let her walk him to the front door. Call me later, okay? She asked. He nodded and stepped outside. She closed the door behind him. He was halfway to the sidewalk when the Bamer twins slipped out from behind the evergreen hedge, their hands balled into red, beefy fists. I'm going to stop here at chapter 17, but I will be back soon to finish off Monster Blood. Thank you for reading with me and have a good night.